hot girls out there walking. I see tits and ass today. Looks like I gotta do some daygame. Looks like I'll get a same day late. Let's go out today. It's bound to be a lie.
Right then, welcome to another edition of the Womanizers Bible podcast. So as I trailed on my previous podcast, I've got a guest in today who has been traveling around a lot, doing Euro jaunting for quite some time. And it's actually almost 1 year to the day that I first met him. So I thought in terms of poetic story arc, the theme for this podcast is a year in game, and more particularly a year of Euro jaunting game. So a bit of backstory. This time last year, I was in Croatia. I'd just done the recording for what became Daygame Overkill, the Infields, and then got rained off, got toothache, all sorts of things happened, and I'd set up the seminar meeting for Daygame Overkill for, I think it's going back now, it's November 8th last year in London. So anyway, I had a week to kill, so I thought instead of just flying straight home, why don't I go back via Prague? So me and one of my travel friends, we went into Prague, and on my very first day, I remember my third set of the day, I got quite a good instant date with a little Serbian girl. And I was walking around the mall, just minding my own business on an eye date, thinking, right, I'm going to take her to a bookshop because I need to buy a book. And didn't think any of that, but when I got home, I had an email from today's guest. He'd actually spotted me in the mall, recognised me, and just dropped me a mail saying, hi, I do Daygame, I'm in town, do you want to meet? So I was like, yeah, sure. We ended up hanging out for about a week, and that was my introduction to who I will introduce by his pseudonym now of Mr. Shotgun. So, Mr. Shotgun, welcome to the show.
Good to be here.
Right, so that's how we met, and then a year passed, and I was in Kiev in August, and a couple of days left, I got another message from Mr. Shotgun. Hadn't seen him since the previous November, and he's saying, look, I'm actually in Kiev, where are you? And I was like, well, I'm in Kiev. So, right, let's meet. So we had a coffee, hung out another day or two, and I must say, my first thought when I saw you was, it was a very noticeable difference in everything. Your fashion, your vibe, the degree of, wolf's eyes, predator instinct. Everything was different. I hadn't seen you for like a year. And while maybe for yourself or for people who know you better, there's this like gradual improvement and you don't really notice what's going on. For me, it was a jump. It was like 12 months. Like when I met you back in Prague a year ago, I would have said you were technically okay, but you were kind of like a happy little puppy, like a keen little puppy,
Right?
like running around and jumping around and like yapping at girls' ankles and biting them on the feet. Whereas now, it's a lot of progress. Now you are basically a traveling daygamer who gets laid. So I wondered if perhaps you can just tell us a little bit about your story, about where you were a year ago, where you are now, and then we'll get into the details.
Well, I'd say a year ago, I was working a dead-end office job, making okay money, feeling my vibe and my masculinity dissipate. And so I decided, right, time to get the ball going. I'd traveled to Europe before, but never for an extended period. It'd always be about a week, 2 weeks tops. So finally I said, okay, this is going to be the big one.
So I should perhaps interject, you're from the east coast of the US, right?
Right.
Not a European.
Not a European, East Coast USA, born and bred on Night Game and the whole Royce Hartiste kind of dark triad world. Mm-hmm. And then I discovered, your stuff and Tom's stuff, probably about, let's say 2013. I mean, I heard the names before, but I never really got into it until about 2013. So, started reading the blog, looking at the videos, trying something different. And I noticed I just felt different, that you go to like a Subway or a coffee shop and you just ask a girl something innocuous versus really laying yourself onto the girl. That's a very different kind of feeling. And it turned out to become very addictive, actually, as these 2 trips have proven. So yeah, I decided, okay, I'm gonna go through. I'm gonna try 2 to 3 weeks in a different place and just see where I go from there.
So, so last year, like you'd been on the road. I think you'd said what was it about 6 weeks or something before I'd met you. You'd come from the US and rolled up in Europe and had 6 or 8 weeks under your belt.
Maybe like it's probably like the 5th week, yeah, 5th or 6th week.
Okay, so do you want to maybe just describe how it felt at the beginning when you roll up in Europe and start trying the London style day game on European women, how that felt coming over as an American who was used to East Coast night game?
It was night and day. I mean, just I'd say a big part of it was the vibe, because as soon as you land in a new city, you're like, it's like the first day of school. It's like just party, 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 or it's like you're in a candy shop and your parents gave you all the money. It's like, go get whatever you want. So it's literally, I felt like I was dropped in heaven. And it's funny because there's been a rhythm that's developed from every city I've been to. The first 4 or 5 days, you're like you might as well be on drugs. Like the euphoria is absurd. Like nothing can go wrong. Even a no feels like a yes to you. And the girls are just much hotter. They're more receptive. Then you start your number farm. You start collecting everything. You go out on the dates. Maybe like you get laid in your first week. Who knows? Then by the time the second week rolls around, everything becomes a lot more normal. You're like, okay, I know these streets, I know these coffee shops, I know how these numbers are going to work. And then if you're there for, I don't know, a third week or so, it just becomes, you might as well have never have traveled. You feel like you're at home at that point.
Yeah, so which countries did you hit first last year?
Last year was the Baltics, then went in via Poland into Prague.
Okay, for my American readers, the Baltics, this is in a part of the world called Europe, which if you go to Google Maps and start moving to the right-hand side, which is east, you see this place called Europe. It has a place called London in it. So the Baltics, that's Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. All right, so you did the Baltics. Sorry, where else?
Uh, Baltics into Poland, and then Poland, that's where I bumped into you in Prague.
Right. So let's just talk about initial differences between the US and Europe. So you mentioned a bit about the girls. So let's talk about how you thought about the girls then, rather than what you think about the girls now. And we can come back to that. So what was your first feelings on arriving and seeing the girls and starting to talk to them? What differences were you noticing?
Well, on the one hand, they're a lot skinnier. They're dressed much better. They have much more of a feminine attitude. But on the other hand, they don't, just because you're a foreigner doesn't mean anything. You still have to go in and put in the work and put in the game. So I think a lot of guys, especially from a place like the US or from Western Europe, where they're not accustomed to this level of beauty, they just think, right, okay, oh my God, I'm in heaven. Let's just cash in. But after a week or so in the city, you start to notice, okay, there's definitely a cultural script, but girls are the same anywhere you go. There is a biological wiring. And I think if a guy is not familiar and attuned with a girl's like innate biology, he'll be disappointed no matter where he goes. So, the first week I'd feel like, okay, I just whatever, go play, have fun. And then by the second week, when you realize, okay, wait a minute, the numbers aren't coming through, or I'm getting a similar flake rate to the US, you start to think, okay, calm down, go back to game 101, go back to your basic principles. Just because these girls are hot and friendly doesn't mean you could just give up the game and just suck up to them.
So, do you want to maybe let's just lead off with one of your early stories, because you had quite a good initial degree of success when you first rolled in to Europe. So, do you perhaps want to pick one of the stories, just tell us a little bit about who the girl was, how you met her, how it went, what happened.
Well, one of the girls, this was an interesting one. I was getting frustrated. I was getting a bit tired. I'm like, all right, I'm sick of this city now. And then I'm just walking through the mall, and she's just seated down.
Which city is this?
This was in the Baltics. This was in Estonia. And she's just seated down, just doodling in her notebook. And I don't know, I just went up to her and said something about nothing. Took the number, didn't think anything of it. Later that night, I'm just going through my texts, and I just send her a little message. She's replying very well. I'm like, okay, this seems promising. So I would be leaving within 3 days. So I texted her, and she was very keen to meet. I'm like, okay. So we met like the second to last day. She doesn't drink a drop of alcohol. I actually took her out to dinner at this like very nice cafe, but it was like the whole meal probably cost about like 10 euros. So it's like either that or a cocktail bar. What's the difference, right? So we're just talking, and I'm just like getting into the whole love bubble thing, doing the whole compliance testing, and I'm thinking to myself, this is really unusual. She seems just super keen. Like there's no alcohol, there's no nothing. It's just I could see it in her eyes. She's accepting my touch. So we go for a walk around the park, and then she starts telling me how she wants to show me some music. I'm like, all right, fine. So I invite her back to my place. Like, okay, we're checking the music out, just like lightly petting, and then just probably from probably 30 minutes in the apartment, she's like escalating, and then I'm escalating, and then the whole thing gets started, and it was probably one of the easiest days on that trip. And all it took was just going up, saying hello, and just moving things along.
Okay, so you said you started off quite well, got a few layers early on. Then you had some dry periods, and the layers started popping back up again. And the reason we're doing the podcast today is you just got your first lay in this town as well last night. So we're capitalising on the happy vibes. Now, this town, we're in Ukraine right now, in early November, been here a few weeks. I think it's a good example of how volatile and non-linear the success is when you do Euro jaunting. So can you give us like a broad brush strokes about how your year's been in terms of ups and downs and wins and losses, layers and near misses, like good towns, bad towns, just like kind of like at a fairly high level overview, how's the pattern of the year progressed?
It's funny, when we first talked about this, you were like, you wanted me to talk about the journey and how I've progressed from last year to this year. And it's really funny because last year I literally started off with a bang. My first month was ridiculous. I laid 4 different girls within a 4-week span. And then after that, I had probably 2 weeks of just near misses. I'd bounce back like 4 different girls to the apartment. Some making out, some light clothes off, but nothing solid. And then by the time Prague rolled around, it was getting very extreme. It was almost like my brain was just getting really ridiculous. Like I'd get harsh blowouts and then harsh hooks. I'd get girls bouncing back on Insta dates, and I'd get girls flaking on like a first or second date. And I'm just like, well, what the hell's going on right now? And then after Prague, it's like I went to Brno, and I had some successful bounce backs there, but nothing resulted in LA. And then sure enough, I made.
Should we just briefly interject here? This is perhaps one of the biggest points you said between the US and Europe, is that East Coast US, if you bounce her back, you're fucking her.
Right. This is something that I think
like LMR. I think Americans who game in America don't really understand what LMR is until they come to Europe.
Right. I mean, in the US, if a girl agrees to come back, it's like 99% of the time she wants to come back and just have sex. Whereas in Europe, she can come back, literally watch a movie, drink your bottle of wine, go home, no problem.
And now we're not saying this is because you don't know what to do when a girl gets home, because in America, you're fucking girls who do that. It's in Europe, it's like a whole different learning curve. Now, I'm not going to say banging hot girls in Europe is harder than America. I can't personally vouch one way or the other, but it's a different learning curve. Getting a girl home in Europe is not the same thing. Right?
It's a different language. I mean, the culture is different. And it's funny because on the one hand, with game, we're trying to hack into the girl's biology. And biology is part of it, but the cultural script, a girl's individual script, her cultural, her societal script, that also plays a large role. And I think that's also why a lot of guys are so obsessed with traveling, because you figure you're getting the same types of girl in the US, the same kinds of responses. Go somewhere else, maybe you'll get a different vibe, you'll get a different response. And but then it's funny because you do get the different response, but you want to revert back to the easy response, where in the US, okay, she bounced back with me, therefore she wants to fuck.
Well, because the way I'd think of that, like, again, I'm projecting here, I don't have personal experience of this, but I imagine if you come from, say, East Coast America, where, girls have higher notch counts, where the biggest step is getting them attracted and horny. So long as you get them attracted and horny, you're probably going to fuck them. Like if you get them home, You're probably going to fuck them. So then you come to Europe and you stand on the street or on a date with a girl who's attracted and horny. You just think, this is like the US, but 2 points higher.
Right.
And then, you're like, brilliant, she's coming home, brilliant. God, this is amazing. It's like Pussy Paradise. It's just like the US, but 2 points higher. And then, 6 hours of LMR later, and she's like walked out the house unfucked, and you're like, it's not Pussy Paradise.
Right.
Right, so if we can go back to Brno then, so let's continue your year in review from Brno.
Oh yeah. So second night, met a girl on the street late at night. I guess you can call it gutter game, and she was just super into it. She just liked me off the bat. She's definitely the bookish, introverted type. Biggest obstacle was she had a boyfriend, but that didn't stop her from grabbing me, making out with me in like a few minutes' time. And then we go back to the nightclub, and there's this, her friend is there. She wants to collect her friend in her jacket. And then this really just weaselly guy shows up. Who's been hitting on her friend, and then he sees how my girl was super into me. So he starts to say, and mind you, he is not from the East Coast USA, but he figures, oh, if I
Let's
drop
just
my...
say the race. Let's just say the race.
Well, it was a Turkish guy. And so...
Sorry, Under.
So it was funny. Him and his friend show up, and one of them says he's from London, the other says he's from New York. And they're clearly not from either, based off their accent and their style and just their general demeanor.
By the way, I should interject here, and we'll get to this later in the story, is Mr. Shotgun looks a bit ethnic. Is not ethnic, but looks a bit ethnic. And this is going to become relevant to the story later.
And so... basically, my girl is doing everything to keep me around, and then her friend is just, wait a minute, what's going on here? It's like, who are all these guys? And I'm thinking, I don't know, I never met these guys before. And she's like, they said they're from New York. You don't know them from New York? I'm like, no, I've never met these guys before, but I heard them speaking Turkish earlier, so I could only assume they're just having fun with you. So long story short, that night went nowhere. Obviously the girl gave me her number. We'd been texting. She ghosted me for like a week. Then she showed up on the last night. Took her to the bar, rebuilt all the comfort and the attraction, went back to my place. She drank all of my whiskey, and then she tells me, listen, I know what you're doing. You're not getting laid on this trip. And I say, what do you mean? She's like, it's fun and everything, but I'm just not that kind of girl. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you mean? And she's like, well, listen, I have a boyfriend. I'm like, okay. And she's like, yeah, and like, maybe if you come back next time, maybe things will change. I'm like, okay, so, but I don't get it. So like, what have we been doing this whole time? It's like, oh, I don't know. It's just a bit of fun. And so for me, it was absolutely amazing that a girl could go this far and just have this like thought in her head. Like she could meet me outside of a club. She could make out with me in 5 minutes. She could like take me on this like whole roller coaster ride with her friends, agree to meet, come back on a date. Like she's super keen. And then at the last second, she could just say, no, I want out.
Now, this is one of the lessons, I think, of the year is the unbelievable skill of time wasting that European girls have. And the further you go east, the better they get at milking you with every last drop of attention while having a rigid line in the sand. So I think a lot of the skill in European Daygame is learning to spot the really subtle signals. And now I'm good at this, but I still make many mistakes, is to spot the subtle signals and to build it into your game to actually filter out the girls who are going to waste several dates, several long nights of LMR from the girls who do want to fuck. And again, if you can compare this to US girls, I think flakiness and time wasting from US girls is a different type of flakiness. And was it you? I think you were telling me that we're talking about the nature of like metropolitan East Coast girls. They're basically all deranged. By European standards, they're all deranged, BPD, and have no concept of the past or the future relative to European girls.
Well, it's very much the advertising, live in the moment, everything is now. If you don't act now, the chance is over. So, for me, taking a number from a girl in the US, I might as well just be like exercising my thumbs, It's like, what's the point of that? In fact, it's really bizarre because I'd say 90% of the time that I've had success in Daygame in the US, it's been an SDL or like a gutter game SNL. Like there's never been a sense where I'm in a place like New York, I take the girl's number and we agree to meet for a coffee or for a wine. Like 90% of the time, it's in that moment, it's right. Whereas here, that's more of the outlier. That's like, okay, something weird happened. It was great, but it's definitely not the norm.
Yeah, I think this is perhaps one of the ironies of the London Daygame model. Is one of the questions I'm asked a lot is, does this stuff work in the US? Because a large number of my readers are either in the US or Canada. And I personally haven't gamed the US. I know guys like Tom and John and Dave and everyone who have. You're obviously a US guy yourself. Now, when you're getting these SDLs and the gutter game in the US, you're pretty much doing the London model. But I think what's different is you're doing the fast London model. You're not doing because in Daygame Overkill, that's based on number farming. Now, that's just one particular strategic decision you can make in the London model. But a different strategic decision you can make is just to keep pulling all the way, insta-date, escalate, bounce, same day lay. So, I mean, do you think, is that a fair thing to say that in the US, you're doing the London model, but you're doing it, to extend the bubble to get the lay, whereas over here, it's a lot more likely to run the model for the number farm, and it's only the outliers where you get a bit of spider sense, or your mood's a bit different, where you think, right, we'll just keep blowing the bubble up to go for the SDL.
Right. I mean, in the US, I'd say 90% of the time when the bubble bursts, at least for me, I can't speak for other guys. I'm sure other guys have their different games and different personalities and mentalities. For me, once the bubble bursts, the girl could care less. She's got so many other things going on, probably so many other guys coming after her. For her, it's just, like I said, it's a live in the now, act now kind of moment. And it's actually been bizarre. I've actually had first dates with girls, some even second dates, and they just don't want anything to deal with it. It's almost like they don't respect you as a man for not acting fast. Whereas here in Europe, I'm finding showing restraint is actually much more attractive. Like, giving her a little bit and then taking it away, more of a push-pull, more of a, nice to see you, talk later. The girl goes home, she sends you a message, I'm home safe, thank you for the amazing night. Like, this is just stuff I don't get in the US. I've tried it. Like, I've tried it for 2 years now. But it's just, for me, it's fundamentally different kind of behavior.
Now, I think, again, this is going to be of more interest to my North American-based listeners, is there are a lot of things about the London model, especially the Jaunt model, which I think until you've done it, you don't really appreciate why it is the way it is. Like a guy who's used to say, actually a guy I might have as a guest on a future show, say a guy like, say, Goldman, who is, I'm going to ask him more about this, but from what you've told me, is, good logistics in Brooklyn, knows how to go to the bars at the right time, knows how to spot the right girls, put the sexy vibe on and move fast and move with great momentum. So other guys who are doing that, they might look at this like the London model and they're like, why are you waiting so long to why aren't you fast escalating immediately?
Right.
Why
are you taking them out why are you taking them out on dates? What is this like?
But I think you could say, right, like you haven't been brought up in the US model. Now that you've done a year of it here, you see why it is how it is here.
Well, yeah, it's funny. Like, you think, this is just some kind of theoretical mind wank. But then you go out and you apply it, like, this works. It gets the job done. And I've actually found deviating from it too much, it's like, you start to hurt your results. Like, it's there for a reason.
Well, that's the story of my year. I've been deviating, trying to innovate, and it's been hurting my results. But yeah.
There you go.
Right, so let's talk a little bit more than getting after Brno. So what happened next?
After Brno, I just went to Budapest for like 2 weeks. But
Didn't like it, did you? I don't know anyone who likes Budapest except tall Jack guys.
Well, that was the thing. I have a friend. He's tall, jacked, and he's got a certain vibe to him, and the girls there loved it. For me, it was like I might as well have been invisible. It was actually really funny. The best leads I got in Budapest, they're either German or Russian. So it seems like, for whatever reason, I didn't click with the girls there. I got out on a few dates. I got a couple of Insta dates and a couple of makeouts, but nothing stuck. And I just felt myself like, I don't like the vibe here. It's just not my kind of vibe. The city's gorgeous. Don't get me wrong. It's a beautiful city, but it's probably just been farmed out. There's just a bunch of guys running around all the time. So girls probably have their pick over there. And mind you, this was also November-ish. So the weather was horrible. It was cold. You could be layered up and the wind would just seep under your skin. Not exactly ideal day game conditions.
Okay, so now we're thinking that was perhaps one of the dips in the year. So we'll move forward to Prague. How did you find Prague? So let's talk about the week that we were hanging out, because that was obviously a very good week for me. Mm-hmm. I think you were mostly, okay, this is like flat arm ego, but you were basically just watching me, right? It was like it was like a week of demo sets, right?
Well, the first 2 days, yeah, it was a bit unusual, like, because you were doing stuff. It was like not really stuff you'd even see in infields, just very like low key, but you were like laying the eyes on. And I think this is where you started your whole, because you came back You came back from a trip with Steve Jabba. like that year.
I'd had a few little trips with them, yeah.
So you were doing LDM stuff, but you're also laying on a lot more of that, whatever you want to call it, more of like an authentic or just like a non-verbal, in-your-face kind of
I
vibe.
was doing a lot of IOI game there as well, because that was the first week, I think, of my life where I got enough IOIs that I could actually feed my day game just off IOIs. That was very unusual, but yeah, that was a fun week. But how about your own game? What happened for you in Prague?
Uh, I mean, I had a regular visiting for a few days, so that kind of like teetered me off. Like it kind of ruined my number farm in a way.
Was that the Ukrainian girl?
Yeah,
Okay.
it ruined the number farm because the first 3-4 days that's your spark.
Okay, so perhaps we should add that in as well. It's one of the advice I always do in Euro Day game, which if you're used to just gaming one city, is you can't waste your first 4 days vibe. You have to act on that first 4 days vibe because you notice a big cutoff if you wait a while to get started. It's not like every week is the same if you stay in your hometown. And there's a very special energy to those first few days that you have to capitalize on.
Especially if it's a brand new city. I mean, it's like like you're a little boy. Like first day of school. All your friends are there. You want to see how everything works. So once that's gone, once you're literally with someone else, just taking in the sights, you're from a very different mind space at that point.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about some of the pain then. So Poland and Minsk. So Warsaw and Minsk weren't so good to you. I think this underlies the volatility in what you were calling the non-linear day game spiral. Right. So you can have times like you start off, a load of layers, then you have a quiet time, then a few things blip up, then you have a grind, and then things pop back up. It's very uneven. So perhaps you can talk a little bit, again, quite a high level, how it was when you had the little bleak Minsk and Warsaw run.
Well, it was weird because
that was this year, right? That was the last couple of months.
Well,
that was only a few months ago.
This trip, I mean, I can't find any pattern or I can't find like a consistent learning experience from this trip because it's literally been up and down, up and down. One city is great, the next city is flat, the next city is great, and it's almost like... So how did I do this? So I was in Russia, and then from Russia, I went to Minsk. And Minsk...
I actually warned you in advance, and it was quite funny. You were like, "What's Minsk like?" And I laid out the pattern that Tom and I had found there. And then I was just laughing to my friends as you were updating me over the 3 weeks on WhatsApp, as you were like learning the pattern that I just laid out, literally like step by step, right?
I mean.
So what was the pattern like that?
So this was my generic pattern for Minsk. The first week, I felt like I was like a little kid in a candy shop with dynamite, and every time I would like press the button and explode, the candy would fly everywhere, and I'd be just swimming in candy.
So just loads of an unbelievable amount of hot girls all stopping to chat, right?
Just staggering quality. I mean, the English was atrocious. But it's like if you had the good vibe, they would stop, they would chat. Like getting numbers was like nothing. Like you could just literally tap them on the shoulder, like here's my number, that kind of thing. And then you have all of these false positives. So from the start, you're thinking, oh my God, this is like heaven. This is heaven. I want to be here the rest of my life in this little communist backwater. And then, sure enough, that's week 1. Then week 2, all right, time to get the girls out. Never in my life have I experienced such frustration.
So there's text hell and there's time waster dates, right? That's the two big things.
That's the two big things. And the girls who do come out on dates, they're experts at milking you with like, giving you just the right amount of shoulder brush or like touching you on the leg or like giving you a little bit of like, oh, I could let you escalate now. And then as soon as you try to, they swat you down. And then I lost count, but I had to have had like at least 5 dates a week. Most of them just first dates to nowhere. A couple of them came back out, but even on the second date, they were like, oh no, kissing is too soon, kissing is too this. So one of the girls, I just laid the talk on her, and I ended up crushing her frame ever so slightly, and she was super into it, and then she backed off again. And she actually ended up coming out on 4 dates and wasting my time the entire time I went on those dates. And for her, it was just all good fun. For her, it's just like, oh, this is so cool, this is so unusual. And for me, it's like, motherfucker, come on now.
Again, so it was actually Minsk is the reason why in my version of the LDM last year, which culminates in Daygame Overkill, why it is so heavy on pushing yourself out pretty hard with a bit of physicality and some sexual innuendo on the street, overt intent of I think you are pretty, I would like to take you out, and then taking a number and let things filter over the number. I mean, that's where it came from, is Tom and I being massively frustrated by false positives and dates to nowhere in Minsk. That was the whole motivation behind that tweak to the model.
Right, and I will add to that too. Even if you lay all that, even if you filter her that far on the street, I mean, this is like a brilliant thing that these girls have going where they will, like, even if you lay your intent out, they'll still try and double guess you. They'll still try and say, what do you want? Or it's like, I thought we were just friends. I thought I was going to practice my English. I thought this was coffee. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. At no point in my interaction with her did I ever give off the wrong signals. I gave off like the sexual adventure guy from the start, and she's still trying to like play this, what do you call them, the silly buggers.
Yeah.
She's trying to play this princess. So what do I do? Like, I'll be over text. I'll be having this kind of like quote unquote talk. It's like, listen, I find you pretty. I want to take you out. It's like, is this time good for you? And she's like, oh, no. I thought we were just going to be friends. I thought we just were going to practice English. And I'm like, oh, Jesus. And I probably had at least 10 to 15 numbers that resulted in just this.
I remember last year when I was in Minsk in April, it was actually a very good month for me in terms of lays, as it turned out. But it started off really badly. I literally had 7 consecutive dates, like day twos, like 7 different girls in a row where they wouldn't let me kiss them. And like it got to the point where I was like saying to Tom and John, I was like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I must have like sprayed on pussy repellent by mistake.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it all turned round, but I remember there was about 1 week where I was probably felt as bad as when I first started game and couldn't get a kiss at all. I actually felt that bad. I was like, what's going on here?
It really plays with your sense of self, especially because you're getting all these false positives, and then you're like, well, what am I doing wrong? You can't diagnose it. And then one thing I learned, like I had like a a mini meltdown in Minsk, and then I decided, you know what? It's not up to me. Like these girls are living on their own lives, they're living their own scripts, whatever it is. It's like this random guy out of nowhere just coming up to them. It's like, if they want to play these games, let them, but I'm not going to stand for it. So I will I will play my hand the best I can. And I mean, I was even like, despite all that, I was getting dates every week. But it's not an easy town. It's not generally a fast sex town. Like, not only do you have to lay your vibe on, you have to be very like, you have to like monitor every step of the process. Like, is she doing this? Is she doing that? So one of the things that I've learned this year in Daygame is just always know where you are. Like, don't just go for the ride and just see what happens, or like have fun, hope for the best. Like, really learn how to read the set.
Well, it reminds you of the importance of compliance, right? Because one thing I've thought for quite a while is physical compliance tells you where you're at.
Right.
Like girls will tell you all sorts of stuff verbally, bat their eyelashes, but it's when you start caressing the hand, it's when you start slapping their ass or pulling them in or going for the kiss. That's when the girl is forced to tell you, is it real or is she a time waster?
Right. And I think with some girls, I even forced the issue. It's like the one girl I had the 4 dates with, like the second, well, I think it was, no, not even until the 3rd date that I got the kiss. And she was really resisting it. She's being like, oh no, we don't do this in Belarus. We don't do this. And then, a few hours earlier, she had me confessing, she went to like a beach resort and she had a lot of fun and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, so you're a good girl at home and you're a slut abroad, whatever. It's like this typical script, it seems, of European girls on vacation. But one thing I noticed is, if you go in the date thinking, okay, this is what I want. If I'm not getting it, no harm, no foul. Just don't drag it on for so long. And granted, in Moscow, in Minsk, here in Kiev, I've only had 1 or 2 girls where I've been out on 3 or more dates. And this is only because I got the feeling, okay, this seems like a genuinely slow girl. I'm going to see where this goes. It's not like I don't have other girls spinning, so I'm not invested in just this one girl. If anything, this is an experiment.
Now, the other thing to bring in here, I think, again, this is going to be, I think, relevant for the US and European comparison, is, again, I can imagine US guys thinking, dude, why bother with all that shit, bro? If she won't fuck on the first date, man, like, ditch the bitch,
Right.
Now, there's a reason why with these girls we take longer, right? And I think everyone can guess what it is who's ever seen photos of European girls, right?
I mean, most of these girls, like, they're tall, they're slim, they're hot. Like they don't need like makeup or plastic surgery. They just look naturally feminine and naturally beautiful. A lot of them, they have very serious studies. They're not low self-esteem girls just like going out and partying. A lot of them, they're working jobs. They're doing all these like crazy classes. They have strong family values. And we're literally just showing up out of nowhere and saying, right, just come on an adventure. Just step into my bubble.
Yeah, so it's a different game, right? It's like, well, there's 2 games going on in parallel. I tweeted this a while ago. You pointed it out. I said, some players fuck habitual sluts and some players fuck good girls on their occasional indiscretion. Now, what we're doing with Daygame is we're trying to do both things side by side.
Right.
Is, you're trying to figure out which girl it is and then how to play it. Yeah, like what you just described in Minsk, that is trying to get the girl on her occasional indiscretion while keeping your eye open for the outliers, which might just be sitting on a park bench horny until you open. So it's essentially two types of game being done in parallel, and they both begin in a fairly similar manner, and they both follow a similar structure, but it's like watching the difference between Floyd Mayweather box and, I don't know, Mike Tyson box, right? They're both technically doing boxing. You can both pick out the same punches, but they're not the same to watch. They're very different style. So let's move on then. So from Minsk, I mean, you did actually finally get yourself quite an unusual fast lay at the end of Minsk, and then it was on to, was it Warsaw next, or was it?
Yes, it was Warsaw.
Poland. Poland, the closest thing to the US that we have in Europe.
For some guys, apparently. my reception in Poland, I don't know if my vibe was just totally shot from all the time.
You can blame Merkel. That's what I think. I think you can blame Angela Merkel.
Oh yeah, I mean, I rolled into Poland, and just from the first day, I just got the sense, this is not my town. Just the girls were generally icy. Like I'd managed to get like a handful of numbers, but I just felt, this just doesn't seem right. Every day I'd grind it out for a few hours. I was like, what the fuck am I doing here? Like, I didn't like the city. I thought it was quite depressing city. The weather was horrible. Just the reception was it was not for me.
I seriously think it was the migrant crisis.
Yeah.
I really did, because I was chatting to a guy I know on WhatsApp, a Polish guy who does a lot of day game. He's quite good at it. He was like, there's no problem here. I was just chatting to Eddie, he just done a residential there. He's like, it's fine. I know Tom does well there. I do well there. But what we all have in common is we're extremely white.
Right.
And you're not.
Well, me, it depends on the season. I'm sure in winter I could be as pasty as you, but in the summer I'll have that really Greek-looking, almost Turkish vibe. So, it is what it is. I don't care, but for some girls it seems to be like an issue right away. So, despite the fact that my fashion is extremely Western, and it's like my vibe and my speech.
English is native,
Yeah, so it is what it is. Despite all that, I was, 12 days or so in Warsaw. I still had 2 bounce backs. I had, several makeouts, a couple of Insta dates. But for me, I guess coming from Minsk to Warsaw, I think even just subconsciously, I'm like, I can't be bothered with this.
Well, it's the quality drop.
Oh, yeah.
I think Poland is a really good day game country. I've had, I put it this way, every lay I've had in Poland, except one, took less than 2 hours. I fucked a girl in the bathroom, in a pub bathroom there on a same day lay, had a 30-minute bounce back, sort of anal, one with a girl. I've had, my Poland stories are some of my best stories, but what they all have to be moderated by is it's Polish girls. They're not as hot as Slavs. They're not as hot as the Balkans. They're not even as hot as the Baltics.
Right. Well, it's a funny thing. When I was in Warsaw, I felt like I was in America, because even the way a lot of Polish people would talk English, they'd have the American accent, because, a lot of them have families there, and a lot of them, they just rip off the whole cultural stereotypes from there, word for word. So I guess for me, it was probably in a way, who knows? It might have been the migrant crisis. It might have been my own vibe subconsciously sabotaging me.
Well, that's the other thing I've noticed about you is you're almost Puritan in that you're so pissed off with the decadence and degeneracy of East Coast America that I think anything that you see in Europe that reminds you of that probably isn't good for you, right?
Right. It just makes me feel like, fuck this. I can't be bothered, if I want this, I'll just go back home and all that. But, and at the same point, literally I was spending 3 months in probably some of the hottest cities in Eastern Europe.
You can't go from Moscow and Minsk and Kiev to fucking Warsaw.
Yeah, it's
God, that feels almost like going to fucking.
It's going from filet mignon to to cheeseburgers.
Yeah.
It's just not. It's just. It is what it is.
But the best stories always happen in Poland in terms of fast, crazy stuff, I think.
Oh yeah, last time I was in Poland, I was there for 9 days and I had 4 bounce backs. This was in Western Poland. The girls just weren't as fast, but 4 bounce backs in 5-day span, just, oh my God. But I guess for me, Poland just doesn't seem to be my country. But, and I'm fine with that.
So after Poland did you come here? Was it straight to Kiev?
Yeah, came right back here.
Okay, so now we've been here 3 weeks, and I have to say, from a personal point of view, this has been the most frustrating 3 weeks of my life. it is, we talked a bit earlier on the podcast about false positives and signals that tell you one thing in one town don't necessarily mean the same thing in another town. So, for example, in Kiev, if you see a girl in like fuck me boots with a really tight leather shorts on and fishnet stockings, she might actually just be a good girl. She might even be a virgin. It doesn't tell you she's a slut the way it would if you're in London, right? The way if you're in Birmingham or maybe in America. Like, signals mean different things. But oh my God, is like, maybe rather than me describe, why don't you describe what it was like the first few days when we were doing Daygame? What the reactions that we were getting, especially what I was getting.
Well, it's actually funny. Like, this is, in a way, this is like a year in advanced game for Nick Krauser, because in Prague I saw little glimpses of it. Like, okay, these girls are really, they're coming out of nowhere. I remember the little Ukrainian girl.
Yeah,
back in that
I mean the
mall.
mall. Yeah, fucked her. Yeah.
The way she eyed us both, it was just like, what the fuck was that?
Yeah.
Like, and I thought, okay, whatever, this is a one-off. But then, literally, from that little example, the first 4 days here, I wish I had the camera on me, because I've never seen such reactions in my life, like not even in nightclubs. Like, something extremely unusual was going on. And it was like the girls, it was as if their brains were just exploding. Like, it was just exploding, and like he just tased them, and they were just frozen on the street.
But there was that example, there was that little fucking model girl, little 18-year-old catwalk model, who I didn't even kiss. But yeah, what was it like when I opened her? Yeah, fucking hell.
I remember we were just walking down the street, and I think like her shoulder was like turned to us. She was talking to her friend or something, and then you just like come in like, excuse me, and she just literally turned around and was like, wah!
Literally jumped. But not like jumped with shock, jumped with like waving a tennis ball in front of a puppy, right?
Right. It's like here's like a massive teddy bear full of money and candy, like, wah! Like,
And literally it was, excuse me, I hadn't got as far as the opener. It was just vibe, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then 2 days later, because I took her on an eye date, 2 days later, I saw her walking through town. I deliberately pretended I didn't see her because I wanted to see what would happen.
Right.
She was with her friends, and she saw me and ran over and hugged me. So then I took the newspaper out of her hand, rolled it up, and started hitting her over the head with it. And she was just like giggling. But yeah, in the end, didn't fuck her. Or what about that one barking at me? That was good.
Oh, that was brilliant. I think it was like a Friday night, Thursday or Friday night. There was two girls, holding hands. A lot of girls do that here. They'll walk together holding hands.
With an orbiter.
There was an orbiter. I don't know if he was a sex pest or just some kind of weirdo. So he was just following them, trying to talk to them, and they're kind of like, meh, meh, meh. And so Nick and I are walking down, and then we cross paths with these two girls, and then the one girl turns around and just literally goes, ruff, ruff.
Like barks at me. Looking at me, barking, yeah.
And I look back at her like, did she actually just do that?
And at that point, she's telling the orbiter to fuck off,
Yeah.
so she can separate.
And then sure enough, the two girls walk away from the orbiter, and then I was like, this girl just barked at him.
I was there, I couldn't believe it. But yeah, I mean, it was just those first few days. It was like, I know you were thinking, you're like, fucking hell, Nick's just gonna get laid every fucking day of the week at this rate.
Like, I'm just like, I give up. Like, I'm
And
just
I
gonna
thought
fold
it.
my hand.
And I thought it as well. I thought it. I was
he-
just like, I'm gonna get laid so much in this town.
I was thinking like he's gonna burn this town to the ground. Like, I might as well just fly home now because this is useless. But
It was outrageous, wasn't it? Just IOIs off everything. And now, when I was here in August, I didn't get this. This was new. So it was IOIs everywhere. I felt like I've never felt so attractive in my life. I felt like every girl in the town wanted to fuck me. It didn't matter who she was. Like, I could just force IOIs. They'd give me IOIs. Girls, like, I didn't even know they were there, and they were IOIing me. And every girl opens. Every girl gives eye sparkle. Every girl gives me the, I can't believe I'm so lucky to be in this chat. Oh, yes, please take my number. And then text hell.
text hell, Minsk 2.0.
Yeah, it was just, and then after that, it was just shit. Yeah, it was just shit.
I mean, if you guys were there with Nick that first week, you would be like, oh my God, this guy is like a rock star. Like, this is like Mick Jagger right here, just walking down the streets. Like, I mean, even the guys were looking at you. What is it? Our friend said you were getting Gaia-wise.
Yeah, and I was dressed almost exactly the same as the year earlier in Prague as well. Same jacket, similar jeans, same shoes, same haircut, same hat, literally the same hat. And I was, yeah. Anyway, I'm. Anyway, it's not a sort of hey, look at me, I'm awesome, because at the end of the day, my results were actually no better than anywhere else.
we just planned.
Anyway, just had an interruption there when my landlord came, so lost the thread a little. So let's get back to what we were discussing. Right, so let's just move forward topic a little bit and discuss the inner game and how it impacts how the year of Euro traveling and day game and the ups and the downs and the emotional roller coaster, what it teaches you about inner game, like what it tests and what sort of conclusions you come out of it with.
I mean, the funny thing is, last trip and this trip, my intention for both was this is a solo journey. This is going to be just me. I'm going to be going out and I'm going to be testing myself to the limits, see what I could do. I had I didn't do any bookings with friends. There was no double airlines. There was no, double bedrooms or hotels or anything like that. It was literally me at home setting everything up by myself. My friends back home thinking like, what the fuck are you doing? I'm like, I'm doing it. So I got on with it. And it's actually really funny. Almost every city I've been to that I intended to go solo, I always ended up meeting someone else. So in Estonia, I had a really good German wing. I mean, he was a night gamer, but I showed him some of the day game ropes, and it's actually funny. He got really addicted to it while I was there with him. But then when I left, he kind of said, "Oh, I'm just going back to nightlife." So, and then in Lithuania, I actually met a really nice Japanese guy, and he actually runs like Japanese style day game, completely parallel to this whole London or US thing. It's just like they have their own kind of thing going on. And I remember I showed him one thing. I showed him this little just a little street stop trick, and then he just took it into overdrive and started running marathons to go after girls. I'm like, whoa, relax. And so this whole time, like, I want to do this alone. I just want to be left to my own devices, let me sort my things out. But I think the funny thing about game is once you start developing confidence, once you start putting yourself out there, people notice it. And they just, they want to come to it. They want to flock to it and share and revel in it. So it's even when I want to go do a solo session, like there's always like just people trying to tag along now, like in some way, shape or form. And in a way, I mean, it's good because you have other people you could like talk with, you could riff off of. But on the other hand, I'm thinking, I just want to be left alone and see what I could do without any help, any kind of like motivation or distractions. Just, let me sort it out myself. So and I guess that's the weird thing about this whole, like, it's not really linear. It's more of like, it's like a spiral and it kind of goes back and forth and ebbs and flows. And,
But like the way you're describing this day game, because I believe that all guys who stick with day game, it's not purely about getting laid. It's not purely about this is the best way to get laid. I mean, normally for the people doing it, it is their best way to get laid, given all their options. But I think what they've all got in common is, I mean, introversion is very high in the day game community. I think stubbornness is very high, and I think obsessiveness is also very high in the day game community. I mean, do you think those traits would describe parts of your character?
I mean, very much so. The weird thing is, I mean, even winging with you, like there's only so much I could do before I'm like my brain just gets overloaded, and I feel like I just need alone time. Like some of my favorite things to do, even back home, like in New York, I'll just walking up and down the streets, pacing. And you talked about this in another podcast about finding the rhythm of the streets.
Yeah.
And I'll just, in my head, like I don't even wear my headphones. I don't listen to music. I just kind of naturally develop like a radio in my head, and I kind of go with the groove and just find my own little way. And it feels good because it's like I'm building my own little world, like kind of like meditating as I'm walking down the streets. And it's funny because girls can pick up on that. They're like, well, what is this guy doing? He's like living in his own world. He's got this kind of vibe to him. So, and then the stubbornness comes in. It's like I've always been like, all right, I'm never gonna just cancel and go home. Like I came out, I put my boots on. I'm gonna do some day game. Like I'm not going to work and day game on the way. I'm not going to the gym and day game on the way. It's like no, it's day game time. People make time to go to nightclubs. Why is it wrong to make time to go out and day game?
Well, I think something we've had is again, this 3 week period's been very unusual for me. Is never in my life have I had so much positive reaction on the street, so many super hot leads, then that just disappear. I mean, I'm used to the flaking generally, but this was very unusual. But nonetheless, at no point did I ever think, fuck Daygame. Fuck Daygame. At no point did I ever think that. I always thought, well, I'm actually just enjoying being on the streets.
Right. Well, we were talking about that the other day. It's like, I mean, how many other, like, what if you went up to your doctor and says, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to walk around every day, getting vitamin D from the sun, sipping on coffee, working on my posture. I'm going to...
15 kilometers a day walking exercise.
Yeah, at least, on a bad day. And I mean, it's just you're getting out, you're being social, like maybe not everything results in a lay or even in a number, but you're putting yourself out there. Because the other thing is, like, when winter comes, I'm going to be locked away, just working myself, into the grave kind of thing. So in a way, this is this is what life is about.
Well, there's something I think very self-reliant about Daygame, because it's solo and because you can basically go anywhere, like
You
within
just
reason.
just pack it up and go.
But I think what it gives you is, I think something you brought out in your notes was, it gets you out of groupthink and it gets you relying on your gut instinct a lot.
See, now that's an interesting thing, because one thing I learned from winging with all these random guys this past year, like 2 years, it's fun. But if I'm serious, like, I'll go my own way. Because one thing, especially like in night game where it gets very chaotic, like guys sometimes have different goals and they're not really cognizant that they're even cock blocking. It's just kind of like everyone has their own way and they'll go in their own way. And at the end of the day, all of my stories, all of my lays, I realized this was all my doing. Like, this was me. Like you ran off to your set, what is it, like 2 weeks ago, I think? You're by the park. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, fuck, we were just having a conversation. Now he's in his set. What the fuck's going on? And then I just, like, kind of broke away, got lost in my own day game trance. This girl cuts me off and starts, like, jutting down. I'm like, she didn't IOI me. I don't do cold approach anymore because I'm with Nick, and it's only forcing IOIs now. And then sure enough, I just got back in the groove. Like, all right. Sigma Wolf, lone wolf, go in. Boom, cold approach. She sparkled right up. 2 weeks time, 2 dates, and first.
That was your set of glory, right?
That was my set of glory right there, and it all came because I just decided, well, what else am I going to do? This is all on me.
Well, I think now what we're also touching on is the addictiveness of Daygame, of why a lot of guys in the community, they who don't do Daygame, they struggle to understand Daygame, and they think Daygamers are a bit weird, or I'll often hear the inefficiency charge, or I think there's a certain incomprehension about a lot of guys, especially night game guys, or guys who don't really do approach. They're like, what the hell is why are these guys just walking the streets like that? Like, that sounds horrible, but it's like super addictive. And one of the reasons it's addictive is what you described, is it's building up this side of your character of real self-reliance and ability to go out and make things happen, which means when you win, you have total ownership of your victory, which is really good. You don't have a team putting you into that position. You have total ownership of it. And it can be very difficult to switch off. But the other thing is the gambling side of it, is that girl, like, if you hadn't decided to approach that girl, you would have had a no-lay holiday in Kiev, right? But you, for whatever reason, you found the right girl who was amenable to your game, and then you did the right things with her, and it came out as a win. But you can spend a long time trying to find that girl, and that is like the addictiveness of it. You never know if the next set is going to be that set. Right. You never know. And even when you're talking to her on the street and you take a number, you still never know, is that the girl who's going to come out in the date and make it easy for you, or is that the girl who's going to give you text hell and you never see her again, or worse, Minsk style time waster? I think it's like every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, you're putting your hand into the like lucky box, pulling out your chocolate bar and seeing if it's got the golden ticket inside it, and that is very addictive when you know that if you stop, you get nothing. But if you keep going, you do eventually get something. You just don't know when that something is.
Well, the craziest part I've realized from this trip, or from this city even, is just watching you work those 4 days. I mean, like I said, I've never seen that in my life. Like, I've seen guys put on good vibe. I've seen attraction. I've seen all that. But it's always like, okay, this is working. Whereas this was 0 to 100 in like 5 seconds. This is overkill 2.0.
Well, you were describing it as plugging direct into the hindbrain, right? It's like brain fry.
Yeah. I mean, it's like he was like laying like a Jedi mind trick on these girls, and despite laying I mean, from what I saw, it was like some of the best kind of like attraction material I've seen in my life. Despite all of that, it's still not up to you. It's like, that's only half the equation. Like, you could lay your best game, you could lay the best game on God's green earth, and it might not mean a damn thing if she's not in the right moment.
Yeah, exactly. And imagine my frustration living it, where I thought I was going to be getting those layers. But I think what it does is it encourages a real stoicism. Is something we've been talking about at coffee is like, maybe I'll just pull the number out of my arse. Let's call it 15%. But maybe 15% of the process is under your control. And of course, it would behoove you as a sensible, disciplined man to get all of that 15% under your control to the max. But even when you're absolutely firing on all cylinders, there's still another 85% which is completely out of your hands. Now, of course, if you're rubbish, of that 15%, you're so shit you've only got 1% of it under your control, right? But I mean, it's that day game I was doing. Pat myself on the back, but I've literally never seen anyone do day game like that before. Not even Jabba. He's like one of the only people I know who can completely fry a girl's brain within 2 seconds, having hardly done anything. But what did it get me? Because it just wasn't under control. Okay, I got laid, but nowhere near as much as I should have. It's just bizarre. And I think what that does is it's like an extreme roller coaster, which you can't have. It reminds me of a quote in Fight Club, after a night at Fight Club, the rest of the world is like a TV with the volume turned down.
Well, I mean, you were talking about that the other day, how just going onto the streets, it's like, I mean, it's the ultimate form of compliance. It's like, this is me, this is who I am, let me see what I could do. Going back to just reading a book or playing a video game, or I don't know, even like going sailing, it just doesn't have the same sense of like making your blood boil.
But it doesn't feel as alive, does it?
No.
Because I say, like, all my frustration in this town has been on what happens on text messages. At no point was I frustrated on the street, because that was actually really, really good fun. It was almost like, let's just go get some numbers. Let's go like put the eye spaz onto a girl, let's just do this. And that was all fun. So one thing I've felt especially this year and really brought out in the last few weeks is that day game. You talked about like it's the sort of thing like your doctor would recommend, right? It's like, I remember back in the old days, whatever, like, this is reading books, I'm not that old, but 70, 80 years ago, you'd have what people call convalescence, right? So you had people who would say live in London, which was all smoggy at the time. Lots of people die from the bad air quality. And if they're getting sickly, the doctor would recommend they go to a spa town where there's fresh air and the birds are singing and there's like clear water to swim in. And the entire holiday was basically 1 or 2 weeks or maybe longer doing nothing, no actual medical treatment. It's just clean air, nature, nice water, nice food, lots of sleep, no stress. And that would be a convalescence holiday. Now, when we do day game, a huge part of the physical side of day game is essentially that. Like, we're doing the equivalent of just going out into the sunshine, chilling out, walking around, drinking water, chatting to your friends. It's the very opposite of, say, high energy, aggressive nightclub dance floor game, right? It's pretty much like the opposite of that. I'm not saying it's better, I'm just saying it's very different. But in terms of, like the health effect. But what it also does is, I was thinking about it, like, what else would your doctor recommend you? He'd say, well, it's good to work your brain. Perhaps if you thought about doing some crossword puzzles or maybe Sudoku, like maybe on your way to work, perhaps you should get one of those little Sudoku like notebooks and a pencil. And why don't you just do a few Sudoku puzzles on the metro on your way to work? Now, day game is like doing a crossword puzzle for like 5 hours straight.
Just the idea of being on, like, vibe maintenance, like like having like a positive vibe, scanning the streets, not being too creepy, not being too aloof, is like just like monitoring all these little things.
It's what John used to say, it's like juggling with 6 balls in the air, and if you drop a single one, the whole thing's fucked.
Right. It's like, you're spinning so many plates and so much has to go right to get it right. And I think it's like me coming into Kiev, I'm just like, my vibe was just shot. I'm just like, I can't be bothered with this. And then you were coming in from like, what is it? You had like a week of.
I was in Chisinau in Moldova where it was just rained off and I had the flu. Yeah, so I was like really like chomping at the bit when I got here.
Yeah, and it's just like once the vibe explodes on the street, it's like, there really is this sense of flow. Like when everything's going right, it's like you're being challenged, but you're having fun doing it, and it's it's better than a video game. It's better than reading a book. It's like, maybe like sports or competitive kind of things could be just as exciting. But I mean,
It's like an NBA Jam when your character literally goes on fire in
yeah,
a video game, right?
or like you have like star power, like from Super Mario or something.
Yeah.
And it's like you feel like the world is your oyster.
Because I found that there was the first good day I really had. It was on the first Saturday here. It was about like day 3 or day 4 here. Is I had a date. I had a second date on with a girl I'd met the last time, a 17-year-old virgin who I'd almost fucked in August. I had her on my bed but couldn't fuck her. So anyway, she'd stayed in touch with me a little bit. I arranged to meet her. I thought, maybe, it's probably a strong lead. Met her for lunch. It was a 4-hour date. She walks me around and, she resists the physicality. She says, look, I got a boyfriend. I'm really into him. Sorry, So I was like, fuck my luck, right? Whatever. It was 4 p.m. I was like, fuck my luck. And then for the next 8 hours was possibly the best 8 hours of Daygame I've had in my life. It was absolutely insane. That's when like the girls are barking and jumping around and, like 3 sets where girl would just like turn her head, eye fucking me. So I just shout at them across the street like, hey, you miserable girl looking at me, you stop, come here, all that like crazy shit. Okay, sorry readers, you kind of had to be there to see what I mean.
No, I mean, I was there, so that was ridiculous. There was a 3 set actually walking. The one in the middle, the little cream and Oreo cookie, she's walking with her friends. I think they IOI'd us the first time. Then the second time they're coming back into the metro, so she throws out the IOI again. And then, I mean, Nick, he was like a little boy. At this point, he was just like little boy with like whatever.
Total inflow, yeah.
Yeah, just completely in it. And I forget what you did. You just like went up to her in
I
spite of her
shouted
2
from
friends.
about 20 meters away. I was like, hey, you, stop. You there. Yes, you in the black. And they all stopped. And then I walked in, yeah.
Oh, my God. And she didn't even speak any English. This was all on like Translate, too.
Yeah. And I was saying to her friends, look, I hope I'm not embarrassing your friend, chatting her up. Yeah, she's still talking to me, by the way. I'm supposed to be meeting her. But anyway, yeah, it was just stuff like that. There was loads of stuff. But I remember I went that night. I just couldn't, basically, I had about 3 hours sleep that night. Now, I didn't get laid. I had a couple of eye dates. I think I had like 3 eye dates, fucking fistful of numbers, loads of fun. And I remember like I couldn't sleep that night because my brain was buzzing.
Oh, you were manic.
And it was like, I remember thinking like I haven't been laid, but I can't remember the last time I had this much fun. Like even having sex was not that much fun. It's like, I just thought like this is one of the best days ever, like certainly one of the best days of the year, because I was essentially in flow state for hours on end. It was just unbelievable. Now, of course, it became frustrating when a lot of those girls flake or the dates to nowhere, like the normal stuff we've spoken about. But that's why Daygame's addictive, right? That's why guys keep doing it, because like I can't think of any other way I can access that flow state. I mean, maybe if I was a sportsman, I could. Maybe if I was, I don't know, a computer programmer who gets lost in the code. But for me personally, the only other thing that even comes close is getting into a very good video game.
No, I mean, the biggest thing, even like whether with me or with you, like every day you're like, oh, I'm not going to approach today. Oh, I'm not going to do anything today. And then sure enough, 5 seconds later, some girl flashes an IOI and you're back off. It's like, it's I think what Tom Torero said, Daygame is the Trojan horse.
Yeah.
And it's like, once you get into it, it's like, you can't just turn it off. It becomes a part of you.
Well, I think that's why we need an off season. I mean, let's talk a bit about seasonality, because I think there's seasonality to the game, both on your side and on the girls' side. So this isn't something I've fully theorized. It's just things I've been thinking about lately. But, I was like, I've noticed that nearly, like by far the majority of my notches come April, May, June, July. Then there's a very noticeable slowdown August, September. And by October, November, they're kind of drying up.
Sure.
And I suspect there's a hormonal thing behind this. I think there's a weather thing behind this. But, I thought I'd ask Tom about that. And he's like, oh, yeah, most of mine come in spring. I was like, there's probably something to this. I'm going to explore it. But athletes have an off-season. Footballers have an off-season.
Sure.
I mean, like, I've got a future podcast coming up that I've already recorded with John where we're talking about regeneration and regenerating your vibe and the difference between the catabolism and the anabolism. But, we're just drawn to the end of the season and it feels harder now. The streets have gone drier, it's colder, the girls are dressed different, they act different. It's so different and I can just feel myself getting towards hibernation, like Game of Thrones, out winter's coming,
Right. And I'm excited for it too. I mean, like when I first started this trip, a part of me, it didn't even want to take it. It's like, all right, it's going to be more of the same, like that kind of joy of going to a new city kind of dissipated this year.
Well, you have it on a macro level, the joy of the new season starting as well. It's the similar feeling, your first 4 days in town, well, like your first few months of Daygame of the year, I think, have a similar feeling as well.
And it's just, but you go in, it's like at first, because this year for me, like weather-wise, has been miserable. Like even until mid-June, the weather was just cold and horrible. Then I finally get out on the road, first stop I'm in Scandinavia, and the weather is still miserable. But like, okay, so I just force myself into it, and I get a lot done. And like that first 2 weeks, and I'm like, okay, I'm back. But I knew like halfway through the trip, like for me, it's after 2 months of being on the road, I'm just like, okay, I'm just like, there's this adrenaline that just seeps out of you. And I think even girls begin to sense it too. It's like you're still day gaming 4 months into November. Girls are like, what are you doing? Like you got this tired vibe to you. And then now I'm just thinking, okay, what do I want to do for Christmas? What do I want to do for New Year's?
I just bought a new gaming laptop last night for £1,000, so I'm very excited. It's going to be delivered in a week back in Newcastle. Anyway, look, as much as I want to keep talking, we're running away with it. We're over an hour. So we actually have a lot more material, so maybe we'll do another podcast together before this trip wraps up. But I think we've pretty much covered the sort of 1 year in Daygame, what it's like to, leave your job, bit of money in the bank, get the flight over to Europe and run around the Daygame hotspots of Central and Eastern Europe doing London-style Daygame. So hopefully the listeners have got a little window into that. It's not Pollyanna-ish, it's not paradise, but it's a very, very interesting lifestyle. It's very much a thing now that a lot of people are doing. So anyway, thanks to Mr. Shotgun for that. Perhaps we'll hear from him more in a future podcast. So thanks for coming on.
All right. Thanks for having us.
Okay, right, let's get some food.